Safe in Santa's Sleigh. Short story by Paul McCann. In the streets of Cayley Town, snow lay crisp and white, and it crunched under the feet of the last-minute shoppers who ran from shop to shop looking for that special something, for that special someone in their life. All over the town, Christmas decorations and lights were draped from the lampposts in the buildings. The winter wind tried to blow them to the ground, but they clung on, despite the wind's fury and flurry. To and fro they were swinging above the noisy street as the night was chasing the crowds back home again. Time was running out for the shoppers. Very soon it would be Christmas. The last bus had left the town, and on board were Mr. and Mrs. Skeptic. They looked out the window of the bus as it rolled along through the little tiny streets, bringing the late-night shoppers back home again. Christmas trees lit up every front window of every house in Cayley Town, and inside every house little boys and girls were getting ready for bed. The bus crawled along the pass, down the river, and made its way up Construction Hill. And at the top of the hill outside the community centre, two passengers stood up and rang the bell to indicate that they had to get off the bus. As they approached the driver, one of them said, "How's things, Barney?" "Oh, Mr. Skeptic." "Oh," said the driver, who nodded his head back and forward repeatedly as he tried to talk as well as watch the road ahead. "Things are good like, and house. Things with yourself now, Mr. Skeptic." Oh, well, I guess, Mr. and Mrs. Skeptic, things are pretty good. Mr. Skeptic replied, "Oh, mind you, Barney, I could say that things aren't the best, but then there's no use complaining, like so I say, that things are well as to be expected. We had to get the babysitter in tonight to watch the kids, It was the last chance we had to get in a few things for Christmas. So, as soon as we get home, I'd say we will have the rest of the night to catch up maybe on some sleep." The bus driver replied, "Aye, sure, I know how it is." He pulled the bus over to a stop, and Mr. and Mrs. Skeptic got off the bus. They wished Barney, the bus driver, a Merry Christmas, and he returned the compliment. They got off the bus and walked along Puddle Lane towards their large red brick two-storey home that stood beside the public park and the children's playground. Before they were able to get in the front door, Mr. Skeptic reached into his pocket and took out some money. He counted out about a day's wages. Then he looked at his wife and said, "Have you got the Christmas card we bought?" Mrs. Skeptic put down her shopping bag and pulled through each one until they found the card, and she handed it to him and said, "Here you are." Mr. Skeptic placed the money inside the card and sealed the envelope. They opened up the door of the house and went inside. Sally, the babysitter, helped them with all the shopping bags, and Mr. Skeptic handed her the envelope and said, "Happy Christmas, Sally. Thanks for all your help this evening." Sally took the envelope and said, "The kids are all asleep. I've done the washing up and put everything away. The ironing has been done and the teapot is on the boil, so if you don't mind now, I'll head on home." Mrs. Skeptic gave Sally her coat and opened up the front door. She reached out and gave Sally a hug and said, "Thank you, Sally." The 10-month-old twins began to cry just after Sally closed the door. Mrs. Skeptic looked at her husband and she said, "Oh, you take Dinny and I'll take Donny." They both made their way to the big cot in the upstairs back bedroom. After a few cuddles and caring words, the twins were off to dreamland again, and Mr. and Mrs. Skeptic went back down the stairs to get a cup of tea. They were just sitting down when another one of the kids surprised them by coming into the kitchen. It was Brian, the 4-year-old, had a habit of sleepwalking, and such was the case this very night. After Brian went through the kitchen cupboard and turned some things upside down, Mr. and Mrs. Skeptic followed him upstairs again, just in case he should fall back down. Brian was safely back in bed, and the house was once again quiet. The 6-year-old Linda, then she began to talk in her sleep, and Mrs. Skeptic went in and caressed her forehead, helping her to settle down. Mr. Skeptic said, "Oh, you go on to bed if you want, and I'll just turn things off downstairs." She nodded in agreement and headed straight for the bedroom. Mr. Skeptic went back downstairs and turned all the Christmas tree lights off and threw a bucket of slack on top of the burning embers in the open hearth fire. He checked to see if all the doors were locked, and he made his way upstairs to the bedroom. Mrs. Skeptic was already fast asleep and snoring, and the second Mr. Skeptic's head touched the pillow, he too had drifted off to sleep. At that time, Libby, the oldest girl in the family, crept out of bed and made her way downstairs. Libby went into the parlour and she grabbed a pencil and notebook and ripped out a blank sheet from the notebook and started to write a message. "Dear Santa, it's Libby Skeptic, and I'm now 10 years old. Even though you might think I am not very wise, well, I am. The thing is, I think it's high time you know that I know what's going on. You see, Santa, I don't believe in you anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm not leaving you out the usual piece of cake and glass of milk. Sorry to disappoint you, but I will not be fooled again by any false reindeer scratch marks on your false footprints as well on the floor. So, anyway, Dad, here is the list of things I want this year for Christmas. A new computer with a selection of games, a new mountain bike with all the reflective lights attached, 3 new walking, talking dolls that you can feed and also put on different makeup in their faces. Another thing I asked for is a DVD player, and that never came last year, so I'm telling you again this year. That's all I want for now, Dad. Good night from Libby, your eldest and wisest daughter." She took the note and placed it inside a plain envelope. Then she took it over to the fireplace and placed the note beside the Christmas stockings that were all hanging up along the mantelpiece. Libby went back upstairs and slipped back into bed. After a few minutes, everyone was fast asleep. Not a sound could be heard. As the dock and the clock and everything around the place started to tick-tock and ring-a-ding-ding, something happened around very strange, and something you could tell was about to happen. The front of the fireplace, the envelope started to glow, and suddenly it burst into flames. The flames leapt up and caught the Christmas tree stockings, and in a matter of minutes a fire had engulfed the entire parlour of the house. Black smoke began to waft through the entire house, and flames were now licking up the staircase towards the bedrooms. Mr. and Mrs. Skeptic woke from their sleep. Mr. Skeptic could instantly smell the danger. He jumped out of bed and ran to the stairs, where the fumes of the fire was almost choking his throat. The fire was well alight, and he went and woke up again the kids, and he said, come on, fire, we have to get out, everyone." They all jumped up as fast as they could. "Jesus, the twins! You grab Denny, I grab Donny." "Okay, you Denny, come on, get out. Come on, let's get out, everybody." "Hurry, love, hurry, come on," she replied. By the time Mr. and Mrs. Skeptic got out, the twins, they could see there was no way out. The fire was raging, and they stood there with the flames, and the staircase was gone, holding the twins, and they stood. The rest of the family joined them at the top of the landing. Libby was the last to leave her bed. No way down, no way out. The stairs were gone. The smoke was getting thicker, and they all made their way into the front bedroom and shut the door. The twins started to cry. Mr. Skeptic opened up the bedroom window, and he stood still. He'd put all of the children on the windowsill on the upstairs room and screamed out in a loud voice, "Help! Help! Please! Somebody help! We're trapped!" The rest of the family all followed, and all of them stood on the windowsill screaming for help. Somewhere in the distance came a jingle, jingle, jingle sound. The sound of jingling bells got closer and closer, and louder until right there before their very eyes, they saw it. A huge sleigh with 6 reindeers descending down from the sky. Sitting in the front of the sleigh was a large man with a big white beard and a red suit. The sleigh seemed to glide through the air like a bird, and soon it was hovering beside all of the skeptic family, who began to jump into the sleigh. When the last of them were on the sleigh, the fat man with the red suit said, "Ho, ho, ho, and away we go." Mrs. Skeptic gave the big fat man a hug, and she said, "Thank God for you, Santa." Mr. Skeptic shouted, "Oh, I thought we were finished, Santa." From high up in the sky, they could see their little red house burning away. "Ho, ho, ho, sing me a Christmas carol, Libby," said Santa. "This is incredible. You know, it's just like you, Santa. While our house is burning into ashes and we're faced with being homeless at Christmas, you want me to sing you a Christmas carol? I don't believe you, Santa." "Ho, ho, ho. I seem to recall you said the same thing sometime before, Libby. Do you still think I don't exist?" Santa said. Libby just looked and she replied, "Santa, we have just lost everything we have." "Oh, can you not see beyond what you think is real?" Santa said. Libby was surprised to see the bright star in the sky twinkle brightly over the roof of a very large house beside the lake. "Ho, ho, ho, your Christmas present this year is this mansion of a house." The sleigh came down to the ground and rested by the front door. "Thanks for the sleigh ride, Santa." Yeah, thanks, Santa," said Mr. Skeptic and the kids. "Ho, ho, ho, the key is in the door. There's a lot more waiting inside. So go and enjoy Christmas in your new home." They all rushed into the house, except for Libby, who went over and she said, "Santa, now I really do believe in you." The reindeers ran away and the sleigh lifted off the ground into the sky. Libby ran inside the house and sat down there beside the biggest Christmas tree you could ever imagine, and sitting on the ground was a DVD player, a mountain bike, 3 walking, talking pretty girl dolls, a new computer with a box of games and a little note from Santa that read, "Just because you can't see me doesn't mean that I don't exist. Keep believing, Libby, and have a good Christmas. From you-know-who." Libby began to dance and she shouted out, "Santa, you're the greatest." Mr. Skeptic walked over to her, placed his arms around her, lifted her high up into the air and laughed aloud. Libby said, "Isn't Santa just wonderful, Dad?" Mr. Skeptic nodded and replied, "Yeah, he sure is. He's the greatest." That's the end of the story.